Silver light exploded through the underground chamber, and for one suspended heartbeat, Mara Vale did not know if she was about to save the kingdom or destroy it. Somewhere above her, the palace doors were being torn from their hinges. Somewhere behind her, an army stood waiting under her own father's banner. And somewhere inside her chest, a power she had spent 24 years being told did not exist was finally awake, burning through her veins like something that had been starving for a lifetime. "Don't come closer," she warned the man standing across from her. He came closer anyway, because the Alpha King of the Werewolf Kingdom was not afraid of silver light, or ancient bloodlines, or prophecies whispered in locked chambers for 300 years. He was only afraid of losing her. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand how Mara Vale ended up standing in that chamber, glowing with a power that could unite or shatter an entire kingdom, we have to go back. Back to a cathedral. Back to a wedding that was never supposed to be hers. Back to a single moment when a king heard a stranger's thoughts, and nothing was ever the same again. The cathedral had been silent for exactly 3 seconds when the Alpha King said, "Lift the veil." Every person in the room stopped breathing. The young woman standing at the altar felt her fingers go numb. She had been warned about this moment. Keep your head down. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not let him see your face. And whatever happens, do not let him discover that you are not the woman he came to marry. Her name was Mara Vale, and she was standing where her older sister was supposed to stand. The wedding dress wasn't hers. The diamond necklace wasn't hers. Even the man waiting at the altar wasn't hers. Everything about this marriage belonged to someone else. Except the fear. That belonged entirely to Mara. She slowly raised her trembling hands toward the veil, one thought screaming louder than everything else inside her mind. "Please don't kill me." The Alpha King went completely still. His golden eyes narrowed. Mara didn't notice. She was too busy trying not to faint, thinking, "I should have run. I should have hidden. I should have let them destroy the family and saved myself. Why did I ever agree to this?" The Alpha took one slow step toward her. Mara's heart slammed against her ribs. "He's going to kill me." The Alpha stopped. His expression changed. Not anger, not disgust. Something far more dangerous. Recognition. Because he had heard her thought. Clearly. As though she had spoken directly into his ear. Mara swallowed. "Your Majesty?" The Alpha King stared at the woman beneath the veil. Then he said quietly, "Don't lift it." The priest looked confused. The crowd began whispering. Mara's heart nearly stopped. "What?" The Alpha's jaw tightened. He had heard that too. And for the first time in 20 years, King Adrian Blackwood was afraid. Not of an enemy. Not of an assassin. Not of war. He was afraid of the woman standing 3 feet away from him because he could hear every thought inside her head, and she was hiding something. Something that could destroy her family and possibly change the fate of the entire werewolf kingdom. King Adrian looked toward Mara's father, Lord Marcus Vale. The man was sweating. Too much. Adrian noticed. "Where is Elena?" Marcus's face went pale. The cathedral became painfully quiet. Mara lowered her head. She already knew the answer. Elena was gone. 3 hours earlier, Adrian's intended bride had disappeared. She had left behind an empty bedroom, a shattered perfume bottle, and a letter saying she would rather lose her title than marry a man she didn't love. Marcus had been given one choice: find another bride, or watch his entire pack lose the protection of the Alpha King. So, he had chosen Mara, his unwanted daughter. The daughter nobody noticed. The daughter whose wolf had never awakened. The daughter who had spent 24 years being told she was weak, disposable, embarrassing. And now, when the family needed a sacrifice, They had finally remembered her name. Mara had been taken from her room, dressed in Elena's wedding gown, and told she would either stand at the altar or her father would personally hand her to the king's soldiers. She had chosen the altar, but Adrian had noticed something no one else had. The woman beneath the veil did not smell like Elena. She smelled like rain, wildflowers, and something ancient, something his wolf recognized. His wolf had been restless since the moment Mara entered the cathedral, and now it was howling.
Mate.
Adrian clenched his fists.
No. Impossible.
The ancient bond had not appeared in generations. Yet his wolf was certain. The substitute bride wasn't a substitute at all. She was the woman fate had been hiding from him. 24 years earlier, Mara Vale had been born during a winter storm. Her mother had died giving birth to her. Her father never forgave her. Not openly. Never enough for anyone to accuse him. Instead, Marcus simply stopped looking at her. When Elena learned to walk, the household celebrated. When Elena shifted for the first time, the pack threw a feast. When Elena received her first invitation from an Alpha heir, Marcus called her his greatest blessing. Mara received none of those things. She learned early that silence was safer. She became the girl who stayed in the background. The girl who served tea while her sister entertained guests. The girl who repaired her own clothes. The girl who learned to smile when people forgot her birthday. But there was one thing nobody knew. Mara had never felt powerless. She had felt different. Ever since childhood, she had experienced strange dreams. A forest beneath a blood-red moon. A white wolf standing beside a black wolf. A voice whispering her name. Mara, wake up. But every time she told someone, her father dismissed it. Your imagination is making up stories because you have no wolf. So Mara stopped talking about the dreams. Until the night before the wedding. She dreamed of the same forest. Only this time, the black wolf turned around. Its eyes were gold. And the voice said, I have been looking for you. Mara woke before dawn, and for the first time in her life, her heart felt hopeful. She didn't know that by sunset she would be standing before the most feared Alpha in the world. She didn't know he would hear her thoughts. And she certainly didn't know that someone in her own family had spent years making sure her wolf remained asleep. At the altar, Adrian continued watching her. Take us to a private chamber, he ordered. The priest nearly dropped the ceremonial book. Marcus stepped forward. Your Majesty, the ceremony is finished, but the treaty will remain intact. Adrian looked directly at him. But the bride is coming with me. Mara's stomach dropped. This is it. He's taking me somewhere private to kill me. Adrian heard her, and despite himself, he almost smiled. The doors of the cathedral closed behind them. Mara was led into the Alpha King's private carriage. She sat as far away from him as possible. Adrian sat opposite her. For nearly 30 seconds, neither spoke. Mara stared out the window, repeating to herself, don't think, don't think, don't think. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Mara's eyes widened. She hadn't heard him, but somehow she knew. Can you hear me? Adrian said nothing. Your Majesty?
I'm listening.
To what?
To you.
Her blood ran cold. You can't hear my thoughts. I can. Mara covered her mouth. Oh no. He heard it. Oh no, oh no, oh no. Adrian's lips twitched. Did you just smile? She asked.
No.
You did. I didn't. You're terrible at lying. And you're terrible at hiding your thoughts. She went silent. For the first time in years, Mara felt seen. And that frightened her more than being ignored ever had. Adrian studied her. Why did you agree to this marriage? Mara looked down. Because I was told to. That isn't an answer. It is the only one I have. Who threatened you? Silence. Mara. She looked at him sharply. You know my name? I know more than your name. That sentence changed everything. Mara suddenly understood. He had already discovered the deception. Yet he hadn't exposed her.
Why?
Adrian asked again. Who threatened you? Mara looked toward the window. My father. Adrian's expression darkened. And Elena? She ran. Why? Because she didn't want you. Adrian looked almost amused. And you do. Mara's cheeks warmed.
No.
The answer came too quickly. Adrian smiled. Honest. I didn't say I was afraid of you. You thought it. Mara groaned. Please stop listening. I don't know how. That answer silenced her. For the first time, Adrian looked vulnerable. He wasn't enjoying this. He was confused by it because he had spent his entire life surrounded by people whose thoughts were hidden behind political masks. Yet Mara's mind was an open book, and every page contained something he had never expected. Humor,
Pain. Courage.
and loneliness. That night, Mara was given a room inside the king's palace. Not a prison cell, not a servant's chamber.
A suite.
A beautiful suite overlooking the mountains. When she saw it, she whispered, They gave me the wrong room. Adrian stood behind her.
No.
This is too much. It is yours. I haven't earned it. His expression changed. You don't have to earn the right to be treated well. Mara looked at him. Those words struck somewhere deep, because no one had ever told her that before. Days passed. Mara expected Adrian to become colder. Instead, he became more curious. He discovered she loved old books. So books began appearing in her room. She loved the garden. So the palace gardener received orders to keep the eastern garden open to her. She hated crowds. So Adrian stopped forcing her to attend political dinners. But there was one thing he could not understand. Whenever he came near her, his wolf reacted violently. And Mara's body reacted too. Her heartbeat accelerated. Her skin warmed. Sometimes she could hear a second heartbeat inside her own chest. Then one evening it happened. Mara collapsed. Adrian caught her before she hit the floor. Mara, her eyes opened. For a moment, they weren't brown. They were silver. A voice echoed through the room. Finally, Adrian froze. What was that? Mara shook her head. I don't know. But she did. She remembered the forest. The attack was a distraction. While Adrian's guards fought the intruders, someone entered Mara's chamber. A hooded figure. Mara woke to a hand over her mouth. Don't scream. She struggled. The stranger whispered, Your father wants you home. Mara froze. My father? Yes. And if I refuse? The stranger smiled. Then the Alpha King will learn why your wolf was sealed. Mara was taken through a hidden passage beneath the palace. But the kidnappers made one mistake. They underestimated the wolf inside her. As fear surged through her body, silver light flashed beneath her skin. The seal cracked, and Mara heard a voice. Not from Adrian. From herself.
Run.
She broke free. The hallway exploded with light. The kidnappers stumbled backward. Mara stared at her hands. Silver energy flowed around her fingers. She finally understood. She had never been a powerless Omega. She was something much rarer. A moon blood. A bloodline believed extinct. A woman capable of amplifying the strength of every wolf around her. But there was more. Her bloodline had one ancient purpose: to balance the power of the Alpha King. That was why her family had hidden her. That was why her wolf had been sealed. And that was why Elena had never been the true bride. The marriage treaty had never been about Elena. It had always been about Mara. Her father knew the ancient prophecy. If Mara ever bonded with the Alpha King, their combined power could unite the divided packs. But it would also destroy the political control of the families who had ruled the kingdom for generations. Marcus had not sacrificed Mara because he hated her. He had feared her. And suddenly every painful memory made sense. The birthdays ignored, the locked room, the medicine, the cruel words, the years of being called weak. None of it had been accidental. It had been preparation. Mara was not the forgotten daughter. She was the daughter everyone had been afraid to remember. This is the chamber we began with. The silver light, the army above, the father who had built a lifetime of silence around a secret too large to contain. Adrian found her surrounded by that light, his sword lowered. Mara. She looked at him. Don't come closer. Why? Because I don't know what I am. Adrian stepped forward anyway.
Ido.
You don't. I know exactly what you are. She looked into his golden eyes. And what am I?
His voice softened.
My mate. The words echoed through the chamber. Mara's eyes filled with tears. You knew. I suspected. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid. She stared at him. The Alpha King is afraid of losing you. Silence. Mara stepped closer. You could have rejected me. I could have. Why didn't you? Adrian reached for her hand. Because for the first time in my life, someone came into my world who didn't want anything from me. Mara smiled through her tears. I wanted you to stop reading my thoughts. I still don't know how. She laughed. And Adrian smiled. Then the palace doors exploded. Marcus Vale stood outside with an army. Marcus looked at his daughter. Come home. Mara stared at him. Home. Yes. You called me worthless. Marcus flinched. You said I was a burden. His face hardened. You don't understand what you are. I understand now. You were dangerous.
No.
Mara stepped forward. You were afraid. The words silenced everyone. Marcus lowered his sword. For the first time, Mara saw something in her father's eyes. Regret. But regret did not erase 24. Mara's power wasn't meant to control them. It was meant to remind them that they belonged to one another. Marcus dropped his weapon. The war ended before it began. But a war ending in one chamber does not mean it ends everywhere else at once, and what came next would test Mara far more than anything that had happened inside that palace. The mountains around the Blackwood Palace were still that first morning after everything changed, as if the whole world was holding its breath to see what Mara Vale would become. She stood at the window of her new suite, watching mist curl low over the pine ridges, thinking about how strange it was to wake up in a bed that did not creak with old grief, in a room that did not smell of dust and forgotten birthdays.
She was Luna now.
Or she would be, once the ceremony was made official. But titles had never meant safety to her before, and she was not foolish enough to believe a crown would change that overnight. 3 days after the battle beneath the palace, the old families sent their first letter. It arrived sealed in black wax, stamped with a crest Mara did not recognize, a crescent moon wrapped in thorns. Adrian read it standing by the fireplace, his jaw tightening with every line, and when he finished, he folded it once and set it on the mantel like something that might catch fire on its own. What does it say? Mara asked. That the circle does not recognize an Omega as Luna. I'm not an Omega anymore. They know that. Adrian's voice was quiet, controlled, the voice of a king who had spent his whole life learning not to let his anger show on his face. That's what frightens them. Mara looked at the letter on the mantel and felt something she had not expected to feel. Not fear. Not exactly. Something closer to recognition. She had spent her whole life being underestimated by people who mistook her silence for weakness, and here was an entire council of ancient bloodlines making the same mistake all over again. Let them be frightened, she said. Adrian looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression softened into the beginning of a smile. You've changed. I woke up, Mara said. That's all. The Circle of Elder Packs had ruled the shadow politics of the werewolf kingdom for over 300 years, long before the Blackwood line had ever worn a crown. They did not rule openly. They preferred it that way. Kings rose and kings fell, but the circle remained, quietly deciding which families prospered and which quietly disappeared from history. Marcus Vale had been one of their instruments for over 2 decades, though Mara did not learn this until later, when the truth finally came apart at the seams like old thread. The circle had known about the Moonblood prophecy long before Mara was born. They had known that if a true Moonblood ever bonded with an Alpha King, the ancient bloodlines that had spent centuries carefully dividing the packs against each other would lose their grip completely. A united kingdom did not need a circle. A united kingdom only needed each other. So when Mara was born beneath a winter storm, and the midwife whispered about silver light flickering beneath the newborn skin, someone in the circle made a decision. A message was sent to Marcus Vale that night, though he never told his daughters what it said. He simply began pretending Mara did not exist, and hoped that if he ignored the fire long enough, it would starve itself out on its own. It never did. Fire that does not starve. It only waits. 2 weeks passed in the palace, and Mara found herself learning a life she had never been permitted to imagine. She learned the names of the guards who walked the eastern corridor, the ones who used to look through her and now nodded when she passed. She learned which of the kitchen staff hummed old folk songs while they worked, and she learned to hum along quietly enough that no one noticed except Adrian, who noticed everything about her now, whether he meant to or not. She learned that being seen, truly seen, took some getting used to. There were mornings she still flinched when someone held a door for her, still braced for the moment someone would remember she wasn't supposed to matter. Old habits do not vanish simply because the world around them has changed. One evening, as they walked together through the eastern garden beneath a sky-bruised violet with the last of sunset, Adrian asked her something that had clearly been sitting in him for days. "Do you still think I'm going to hurt you?" Mara stopped walking. "No," she said, and she meant it. "But I still expect someone to." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "Who taught you to expect that?" "Everyone," Mara said simply. "My whole life." He reached for her hand, and this time she did not pull away. "Then I suppose," he said, "we have some time to spend teaching you something different." But peace, even quiet peace, rarely lasts long in a kingdom that has just discovered its balance of power has shifted. The first attack came on the night of the new moon, when wolves are at their weakest and their instincts run closest to the surface. A dozen masked intruders breached the northern wall using silver-tipped arrows, a weapon outlawed among the packs for over a century because of how efficiently it could kill even the strongest alpha. Adrian was not caught unprepared. He had doubled the guard since the circle's letter arrived, and the intruders were driven back before they reached the inner halls. But one of them was captured alive, and what he confessed beneath questioning made Adrian's blood run cold in a way battle never had. "They didn't send us to kill the king," the intruder said, shaking, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. "They sent us for her." Mara, standing just outside the door, heard every word. She should have felt fear. She had felt fear her entire life, ever since she was a child hiding in the shadow of her sister's brighter existence. But standing there in the corridor, listening to a stranger confirm that an entire council of ancient families considered her dangerous enough to kill, Mara felt something different rise inside her chest instead. She felt certain. For the first time, she understood completely what her father had always been afraid of. That night, Adrian found her in the library, surrounded by old books about bloodlines and prophecy that she had pulled from the highest shelves, dust still clinging to the covers. "You should be resting," he said. "I should be understanding," Mara said, not looking up. "There's a difference." He sat across from her, watching the candlelight move over her face as she read. "What are you looking for?" "Why me?" she said. "Why now? Why my family?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Does it matter?" Mara finally looked up at him. "It matters to me." My whole life, people decided who I was without asking me. I'm done letting that happen. If I'm going to be hunted for what I carry, I want to understand exactly what that is before I decide how to fight it. Something in Adrian's expression shifted, something quiet and proud, and a little afraid all at once. You're not what they expected, he said. You're not what I expected. Is that a compliment? It's the truest thing I've ever said. The book that finally gave Mara her answer was older than the kingdom itself, its pages brittle, and its ink faded to the color of dried blood. It told the story of the first Moonblood, a woman named Selene who had lived centuries before the first Alpha King ever wore a crown. Selene had not been born powerful. She had been born quiet, overlooked, the youngest of 11 children in a pack that barely remembered her name. But when the packs of the old world fell into civil war, tearing themselves apart over territory and pride, it was Selene's blood and Selene's bond with a wolf she chose freely that finally forced the warring packs to remember they were not enemies. They were family. The book called it the balance. Not power over others, but power that reminded others of what they had forgotten. A Moonblood did not conquer. A Moonblood restored. And that, Mara finally understood, was exactly why the Circle feared her. Not because she could destroy them. Because she could make an entire kingdom remember it never needed to be divided in order to survive. She closed the book slowly. They're not afraid I'll take their power, she said quietly. Adrian looked at her. They're afraid you'll make it pointless, he said, finishing the thought for her. Mara nodded. For the first time since the wedding, she smiled without any fear behind it at all. The Circle did not wait long to respond to their failed attack. Within days, a formal summons arrived, demanding that Adrian appear before the Elder Council to explain why he intended to bond with a woman they still refused to call Luna. Adrian's advisors urged him to refuse. A king did not answer to shadows, they argued. A king who bowed to the Circle once would spend the rest of his reign bowing again and again. But Adrian surprised them all. He accepted the summons, and he told them he would bring Mara with him. You don't have to, Mara said that night, watching him prepare. I could stay here. You could, Adrian agreed. But they need to look you in the eyes and understand you're not something they can erase with a letter and a threat. Mara felt her pulse quicken, not entirely from fear. And if they try something in that hall? Adrian's expression hardened into something Mara had not seen from him before, something ancient and unmovable. Then they'll learn exactly why my wolf has been silent for 20 years, waiting for something worth breaking that silence for. The Elder Council's chamber sat deep beneath the mountains, a room carved from black stone that had not seen daylight in 3 centuries. 13 seats circled a raised dais, each representing one of the oldest bloodlines in the kingdom, families whose names had shaped history long before written record began. Mara walked into that chamber with her chin lifted, wearing no borrowed jewelry, no stolen identity, just herself. The council's eldest member, a silver-haired woman named Isolde who had outlived 4 Alpha Kings, studied Mara with eyes the color of frost. You understand what you are, Isolde said. It was not a question. I understand what I've been told I am, Mara said. I'm still learning the rest. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Isolde's expression did not change, but something behind her eyes did. Your bloodline has ended kingdoms before, Isolde said. Selene's bond broke 3 dynasties before it built one. It didn't break them, Mara said, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt in her chest. It broke the lie that they needed to be separate to survive. If that frightens you, maybe it's worth asking why unity feels like a threat to people who claim to serve this kingdom. Silence swallowed the chamber. Adrian, standing beside her, said nothing. He didn't need to. He simply watched the council absorb the fact that the woman they had summoned to intimidate had just turned every one of their assumptions back on them, quietly, without raising her voice once. Isolde studied Mara for a long moment. You are not what your father described, she finally said. My father, Mara said, never really looked at me long enough to describe me at all. The council did not grant its approval that day. Old power rarely surrenders in a single conversation. But something shifted in that chamber, something that would take weeks to fully unfold, and Mara left the mountain feeling, for the first time, like the ground beneath her had stopped shifting. On the ride home, Adrian watched her staring out the carriage window, the mountains rolling past in the fading light. You didn't need me in there, he said quietly. Mara turned to him, surprised. I've never needed anyone to fight my battles, she said. I just spent 24 years being told I wasn't allowed to fight them myself. Adrian reached over and took her hand. I think, he said, the kingdom is about to learn exactly what happens when the person everyone underestimated finally gets the chance to prove them wrong. Mara smiled, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, it reached all the way to her eyes. But peace built on a single conversation is a fragile thing, and the circle was not the only shadow still moving through Mara's story. Elena had not been seen since the night she fled her own wedding, and though Marcus had told the kingdom his eldest daughter had simply run from duty, Mara had never quite believed that was the whole truth. Elena had always been many things: careless, self-absorbed, quick to chase whatever made her happiest in the moment, but she had never been a coward. And cowards do not leave behind a note explaining exactly why they refuse to marry a man they don't love. Cowards simply disappear. Mara thought of her sister often in the quiet hours before sleep, wondering where she had gone, wondering if she was safe, wondering, in the parts of herself she rarely admitted out loud, if some piece of Elena had known all along what their father was hiding and had run not because she feared marriage, but because she feared what marrying Adrian might have awakened in a sister she had spent her whole life ignoring. She got her answer sooner than she expected. It happened on a quiet afternoon nearly a month after the council meeting, while Mara walked the eastern garden alone, the one place in the palace that still felt entirely hers. A figure stood at the garden's edge, hood drawn low, waiting near the old stone archway that led toward the forest beyond the palace walls. Mara's guards moved to intercept, but the figure lowered the hood before they reached her. It was Elena. Thinner than Mara remembered, her golden hair dulled from weeks without proper care, but her eyes were exactly the same, sharp and stubborn and achingly familiar. Mara, Elena breathed, and for a moment neither sister moved. You're alive, Mara finally said. Barely, Elena admitted. I've been running since the night I left. I couldn't come back. Not until I was sure it was safe. Not until I was sure you were safe. Mara's guards kept their distance at her signal, though their hands remained close to their weapons. Why did you run, Elena? Truly. Elena's composure cracked for the first time. Because I heard him, she whispered. Father. Talking to a man in a black cloak, 3 nights before the wedding. He said the bride had to be a Vale daughter, that it didn't matter which one, that the circle only cared about the bloodline, not the name on the invitation. Elena's voice trembled. I didn't understand it then. I just knew something was wrong, and I was terrified, and I ran because I didn't know how to fight whatever was coming. I didn't know it would fall on you instead. Mara felt something complicated rise in her chest. Not quite forgiveness, not quite anger. Something suspended somewhere in between. You left me to take your place without a word of warning. I know, Elena said, tears finally falling. I've hated myself for it every single day since. I told myself you'd never actually be forced to go through with it. I told myself Father would find another way. I was wrong about everything, Mara, and I am so sorry. Mara studied her sister for a long moment, searching for the lie she had once assumed lived behind every word Elena spoke. She didn't find one. She found only guilt, raw and unpolished, the kind that doesn't announce itself for attention because it has nowhere left to hide. I'm not the girl you left behind, Mara finally said. I can see that. Elena said quietly, looking at the faint silver light still visible beneath Mara's skin in the afternoon sun. You're so much more than any of us ever let you be. For the first time in either of their lives, it was Elena who reached for Mara's hand, not the other way around. I don't expect forgiveness, Elena whispered. I just needed you to know the truth. And I needed to warn you. The man in the cloak, the one father spoke to. I saw him again 3 days ago, in the village outside the palace walls. He's still here, Mara. He never left. That single warning changed everything. Adrian doubled security across the palace that same night, and by morning, his most trusted trackers had identified the cloaked man Elena described, a circle enforcer named Ronan Ashgrove, notorious among the old bloodlines for handling tasks the council preferred to keep unofficial. Ronan had been quietly embedded in the village for weeks, watching the palace, waiting for an opportunity the failed Silver Arrow attack had not provided. Adrian wanted him captured immediately. Mara, surprising everyone in the war room, suggested something else entirely. Let him think he still has the advantage, she said. If we corner him too quickly, the circle sends someone we don't know next. But if we let him believe his plan is working, he'll lead us straight to whoever above him is actually giving the orders. Adrian studied her for a long moment, something like admiration flickering behind his eyes. You're asking me to use you as bait. I'm asking you to trust that I'm not fragile enough to need protecting from every shadow that moves near me, Mara said evenly. I spent 24 years being underestimated, Adrian. Let's use that. Let them underestimate me one more time. It'll be the last mistake they make. The plan unfolded over the following week with careful precision. Mara began taking quiet walks near the village edge, always accompanied by guards disguised as ordinary travelers, always giving Ronan exactly enough opportunity to believe she was vulnerable without ever truly being unguarded. It worked exactly as Mara predicted. On the 7th night, Ronan made his move, slipping through the tree line as Mara walked the forest path just beyond the palace's outer wall. He was skilled, silent, trained in exactly the kind of shadow work the circle valued most. But he had never once considered that the woman he was hunting might already know he was there. You've been watching me for 3 weeks, Mara said calmly, not turning around. I'd hoped you would be more patient. The circle usually chooses more careful hunters. Ronan froze. Before he could react, Adrian's guards emerged from the surrounding trees, and Mara finally turned to face him, silver light glowing faintly beneath her skin, calm and unshaken. Tell your council, she said quietly, that I'm done being hunted. If they want a war, they should understand exactly what they're choosing to fight. Ronan was taken into custody without a single drop of blood spilled, and what he eventually confessed unraveled far more than anyone in the palace expected. Ronan revealed that Marcus Vale had not simply been coerced by the Circle years ago. He had once been an ambitious young alpha heir himself, promised a seat among the elder families if he could ensure the Moonblood bloodline was permanently suppressed. Marrying Mara's mother, a woman rumored to carry Moonblood ancestry herself, had been Marcus's idea entirely, a calculated risk meant to secure his own rise within the Circle's ranks. When Mara's mother died in childbirth, and the midwife reported the silver light beneath her newborn daughter's skin, Marcus panicked. He had gambled everything on controlling the bloodline quietly, privately, and instead he had produced exactly the kind of child the Circle had ordered him to prevent from ever existing. So he did what desperate, frightened men often do. He buried the truth beneath decades of silence, punishing the daughter, who represented his failure, by pretending she had never mattered at all. Mara sat in stunned silence as this was explained to her, feeling old wounds reopen and, strangely, begin to close all at once. He didn't hate me, she finally said, more to herself than anyone else in the room. He was terrified of what I represented to people far more powerful than him. That doesn't excuse what he did to you, Adrian said quietly, watching her carefully. No, Mara agreed. It doesn't, but it explains it. And somehow, understanding it hurts less than not understanding it ever did. Marcus was summoned before the council himself in the weeks that followed. His decades of quiet service finally weighed against his failure to prevent the very outcome he had spent a lifetime engineering to avoid. The old families, Mara learned, rarely forgave failure, regardless of how loyal the failure had once been. Mara did not attend the hearing that stripped her father of his title and lands. She did not need to see it to understand what it meant. For the first time in her life, the man who had spent 24 years making her feel invisible had become powerless himself, and Mara found she took no satisfaction in it at all. Only a quiet, aching sadness for the family that might have existed if fear had not been allowed to poison it from the very beginning. Elena, given the choice to remain loyal to their father or step fully away from the life that had shaped them both, chose to stay near Mara instead. Slowly, carefully, the two sisters began rebuilding something neither of them had ever truly been permitted to have before, an honest relationship built without secrets standing between them. Months passed, and the kingdom began to change in ways that even Adrian's most cautious advisors had not expected. Pacts that had feuded for generations over old territorial disputes found themselves inexplicably drawn toward reconciliation whenever Mara was present, her moonblood presence gently reminding wolves who had forgotten how to trust each other exactly what unity had always felt like. She did not force peace. She simply made peace easier to choose. The circle, weakened by Marcus's exposure and unable to publicly justify further aggression against a Luna the pacts themselves had begun to openly embrace, slowly retreated into the shadows they had always preferred. Not defeated entirely. Old power like that rarely disappears completely, but quieted, for now, in a kingdom no longer willing to let fear dictate who deserved to belong. On the day of Mara and Adrian's true wedding, the cathedral was filled beyond capacity. Packs from every corner of the kingdom gathered together beneath one roof for the first time in living memory. Mara stood at the altar, wearing a simple white dress. No borrowed jewels, no stolen identity, no veil hiding her face from the world. Elena stood beside her as her only attendant, tears in her eyes that had nothing to do with sadness. Adrian waited for her exactly where he had waited months before, though everything about the moment felt entirely different now. "Are you nervous?" he asked quietly as she reached him. "Terrified," Mara admitted, smiling. "Of me?" "No," she said, looking around at the packed cathedral, at every face finally turned toward her without judgment. "Of finally being seen completely and realizing I'm not afraid of it anymore." Adrian took her hand. "Then let them see you," he said. "All of you." He turned toward the gathered crowd, his voice carrying easily through the silent cathedral. "This woman was told she was weak," he said. "She was told she was worthless. She was told she needed to disappear to keep others comfortable. She was wrong to believe any of it, and every single one of us standing here today owes her the truth she deserved from the very beginning." Mara's eyes filled with tears as the entire cathedral, packs who had once feared and hated each other, bowed together as one. Later that evening, as the celebration continued below and the mountains outside glowed under a rising moon, Mara stood alone on the balcony of what was now truly her home. Adrian found her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind, resting his chin gently against her shoulder. "Can you still hear my thoughts?" she asked, smiling. "Every single one," he said. "I've stopped minding it." She laughed softly. "What am I thinking right now?" Adrian considered her for a long moment, his expression turning thoughtful. "You're wondering if the girl who used to hide in the shadows would recognize the woman standing here now." Mara's breath caught slightly. "That's exactly it." "And," Adrian asked gently, "would she?" Mara looked out over the mountains, silver light still glowing faintly beneath her skin, No longer something to fear or hide, but something entirely her own. "I think," she said slowly, "she'd finally understand that she was never the one who needed to change. Everyone else just needed to catch up to who she already was." Adrian pressed a quiet kiss to her temple. "They finally have," he murmured. And somewhere far below them, in a kingdom that had spent generations divided by fear, Pax who had once been strangers to one another danced together beneath the same moon, finally remembering they had never truly needed to be enemies at all. Because sometimes the people who spend their whole lives being overlooked are not being punished by fate. They are simply being kept in reserve, quietly gathering strength, waiting patiently for the exact moment the world will finally need them to remind everyone else what they had forgotten. And when that moment finally comes, it does not arrive quietly. It arrives exactly the way Vale arrived. Unannounced, underestimated, and absolutely unstoppable. If this story moved you the way it moved us while telling it, let us know in the comments what part stayed with you the most. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, because there are so many more stories like Mara and Adrian still waiting to be told.